looking at the fruit, right? Looking at the fruit of the Spirit, reading 1 Corinthians 13, it really breaks down, and like in John especially, talking about what love looks like, right? I feel like we have all of those reference points to go to and to really grapple there, right? It's just like, if this is who you say you follow, and this is who he is and who he's created us to be, we need to, like, what are we noticing here? And what are we wondering about the disconnect between who God made us to be and who we are largely perceived as Christians to be?
Hello and welcome to the Being Formed podcast. My name is Adam. I'm the host of the show. I'm also the president and the co-founder of LifePoint Resources. We're a soul care ministry based out of Denver, Colorado, but we have people on our soul care team who live all across the United States and meet with people all over the world. And it just so happens this podcast is listened to all over the world. And so if you're listening and you're looking for someone to come alongside you and provide some needed soul care through listening, through spiritual direction, and through formational mentoring or transformational coaching, please reach out to us so we can be of service to you. Well, today I'm joined by Afrika Afeni Mills. Afrika is an educator, spiritual director, pastor, and writer who's passionate about racial healing and human flourishing. Afrika is the author of Open Windows, Open Minds, and her widely shared work, A Letter to White Teachers of My Black Children. She also gave a TED Ed talk called 4 Ways to Have Healthy Conversations About Race. Afrika's upcoming book is called Sowing the Seeds of Shalom, which invites us into the deep work of reconciliation and spiritual formation. How those two things come together is a really fascinating topic, helping us imagine what it looks like to live with wholeness and right relationship and sacred restoration. Afrika is a friend of mine through the Transforming community, Ruth Haley Barton's 2-year cohort of transforming kind of learning and retreat style. And so I met Afrika there. She was excited about the fact that her book, her upcoming book, is picked up by IVP. It's going to be published early 2026 or sometime in 2026, I should say. So I'm just really grateful to have Afrika here on the Being Formed podcast. You're going to love this conversation, I promise you. So with that, let's step into the conversation and hear directly from Afrika about the heart behind her new book and the journey that's brought her here. Afrika Afeni Mills, thank you so much for being a guest on the Being Formed podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you invited me. I'm so honored to be here.
The honor is truly mine,
Oh,
Afrika.
thank you.
We're really excited about the fact that you have a new book coming out soon.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah. So as we get started, I want to ask you a question I ask all of our guests at the beginning of the episode. And the question is, how is it with your soul?
Oh, my soul is feeling quite a bit of delight. My soul is delighted. I think that's not always the case, right? Like some days, some days feel a little bit differently. But today, I'm feeling a lot of just gratitude. I think probably too, I had just finished writing in my gratitude journal. So that probably is influencing a lot of how I feel right now. But just taking the time, even when times are hard, to just like write down where I see God showing up for me just really puts me in a really grateful place. And my soul is good. My soul is good right now.
Your soul is good and filled with
Yeah.
gratitude.
Yes, absolutely.
That is wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Where are you calling in from?
I am calling in from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that your home? Has North Carolina been your home your whole life?
It has not been. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I'm
Okay.
a New York City girl.
Uh-huh.
And then after going to school, to college in East Texas, I came back to Brooklyn for a little while, and then I ended up moving to the Boston area for love and graduate school.
Uh-huh.
And then my husband and I, we got married after he was done with school because I'm a little older than him. And we ended up staying there and
Mhm.
raising our family in and around Boston. And then 4 years ago, we
Mhm.
relocated to Charlotte. Yeah.
4 years ago.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
hmm
Tell us a little bit about your family.
Oh my, okay. First of all, oh my gosh, my husband and I have been married for 28 years this past May. And when I say like he is my bestie, like legit, he is absolutely such deep joy in my life from that relationship. Yeah,
Mm.
he's my best friend. He's my best
Mm.
friend. And then we have two adult children. So our
Mhm.
daughter is the oldest, even though like when you look at them, people assume our son is older because people still equate like height with age somehow. So she's 5 feet tall,
Oh,
which is
well,
so interesting
really?
for me as like I'm almost 6 feet. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so she's 23. She'll be 24 in November, and then our son, who is they call each other like when they talk to each other, it's my little big brother. So he's closer to my height, but he
Mm.
is 22. He'll be
Mhm.
23 in December. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so they're
Mhm.
both. Our daughter lives at home with us. Our son is in finishing his master's in social work. And
Mhm.
so he's still in the Boston area. He's at Boston
Okay.
College, and we have our fur baby who we just celebrated our dog's gotcha day on September 3rd. So our dog Rabbit. Yep.
Rabbit.
Yes. Everybody's always like, "You have a dog named Rabbit." I'm like, "Yes." When we rescued
Yes.
her, that was her name, and
Oh,
we think she's around 13, but she's still sassy. I think she still thinks she's a puppy.
how long
So
have you
yeah,
had her?
10 years. We just
10
celebrated
years.
10 years with her. Yeah, yeah. And so
Oh.
she adds a lot of spice. A lot of spice to our lives, yes. But
Okay.
also people who meet us, they're like, your dog is spoiled. And I'm like, I don't really believe in the word like spoiled, but
Yeah.
she's treated very well. So I think
Okay.
her gotcha day ended up being like most of her days, which
She
are pretty
knows.
good.
She knows
Yes.
she's loved.
She does. She is well aware. Well aware.
Oh, Africa. It's just
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I could just feel the joy and
Yes.
the excitement of you in this
Thank
conversation.
you. Thank you.
I'd love to hear a bit of your journey, and I
Oh,
think our listeners would
yeah.
too, especially as it relates to spiritual formation. Our show is really
Yes.
about life with God and
Yes.
spiritual formation, spiritual
hmm
direction, soul care.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I know you and I share that language.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So I guess my beginnings of like awareness of God started when my family, as I was growing up, I was around 11 years old when we started going to church. I didn't have any experience with church prior to that, except for maybe I remember going to visit church with a friend one time, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like I didn't have any framework for that. And I do
Mm,
remember, actually, that I think about it, I have an aunt. She's passed on since this time, but I remember going to like Kingdom Hall for like a Jehovah's Witness
okay.
service.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't know what was happening then.
Uh-huh.
But when we started going to church, the church that we were going to, I'll talk about what felt helpful about it. My family, going into being a part of a community of believers, was a really good overall change for my
Mhm.
family.
Mm.
So I definitely want to give props, right,
Yeah.
to just even an awareness of God at all, it was the beginnings of something very healthy. At the same time, the church, the denomination that we were part of was very legalistic.
Really. Mm.
Very legalistic, yes. And I would say probably the beginnings of my relationship with God for the first, like from the time I was 11 until I was around 18, which is around the time I got baptized, very much fear based.
Mm.
So it was a lot of like, okay, in order to be accepted by God, you have to follow these rules and do these specific things. And I remember being very afraid that if I messed up, that God would be displeased with me, that He would reject me. And I was terrified. I was
Mm.
terrified of that. And there was a lot of that happened in the church that I was a part of, like friends of mine who would be suspended from church
Oh.
for sinning,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm like none of like all of us aren't doing that, right?
Right.
All of us
Right.
don't have brokenness, right? But that very punitive. There would be women, like if women would become pregnant and they weren't married, they would be suspended from church until after they had the baby, which as a kid confused me. I'm just like, but we know the baby came from somewhere, right? Like, why can't she come back after the baby's born? This feels kind of incongruous.
Right.
Right? This is not like a surprise baby that just, she
Yeah.
found
Yeah.
somewhere. This is her
Right.
child. And so
Right.
just
That's
watching that
strange.
growing up, yeah, very much so. And so I just remember being very afraid. And then after, like, I remember, like, I got baptized when I was just about to turn 18.
Uh-huh.
That was like a hallmark moment, because the person who I met with, because we would meet with someone to kind of like have like pre-baptism counseling, and the person that I met with, it was a very different experience to the rest, comparatively to the rest of the experience I was having, because at this time I had gone to the college, the one that I mentioned in East Texas, was a college that was affiliated with a denomination.
Okay.
But the person who counseled me for baptism, like, he was talking to me about Jesus, which is not really a focus that we had. The church was very much focused on Old Testament.
Mhm.
So a lot on like Old Testament holy days and dietary restrictions and things like
Mhm.
that. And so I remember just that time feeling very special. Like, it's almost like I felt like my baptism was just like atypical from anything I had been experiencing.
Wow.
Actually, I had tried to be baptized the year before, but the person who was serving as my pastor before I went away to school, he like laughed at me. And I was like, why are you laughing?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, he was like, you're so young. And what if some guy comes along and captures your attention? And I wasn't even dating. Like, my parents didn't even allow me to date. And so at that point, I wasn't dating anyone. And so I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm just trying to make a commitment to God, and I don't
Right.
understand. Right? It just didn't feel good. So the experience that I had when I actually ended up getting baptized was really beautiful. But also, we were part of still that same denomination. But interestingly enough, the person who founded that denomination had passed away around the time that my family started to attend. And then the person he picked to succeed him knew that the way that he was leading the denomination was not, it was not in alignment with who Jesus is.
Mm.
And so a little at a time, he started to change things. And then every time he would change something, people would leave. But the whole
Mm.
time I was excited. I'm like, oh yeah, seems like all the things that I was uncomfortable about are going away, which is good. So anyway, all that to say, then I'll fast forward, because even with the denomination going through a major shift into what would become like mainstream Christianity for the denomination, I was like, okay, so now I really want to know about Jesus, because we really weren't talking about Jesus at all. And so around that time was when my husband and I got married. We were babies when we got married. And we were like, we want to know about this Jesus, right? He grew up in that denomination. And so we really hadn't had our own experience. And so we started to like go around to, like, we were Baptist for a while and we were Pentecostal for a while. Right? We experienced different iterations or expressions of a faith
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And I'll fast forward to when I would say probably about 4 years ago was the first time I ever even heard the term or the phrase spiritual formation. I had never heard it before. And so a good friend of mine, she just was talking to me about it because it's a big part of her life. And so she just started mentioning things to me. She would say like spiritual formation. She talked about having a spiritual director. And I was like, what are you talking about? She started talking about using words like consolation and desolation. And I was like, I don't know what you mean, but I'm like drawn in. I'm so intrigued by what she's talking about, because it sounds like it's unfamiliar, but also really beautiful. And so the more she shared with me, I just started like looking, I'm a big researcher. I don't know how many folks are listening who are into the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 6 wing 5. And like taking in information is something that I do pretty regularly. And it was really good in that sense, because I started to find information about spiritual formation. So I found initially Rich Violas, who leads New Life Fellowship in Queens, New York. I found that there was like a school of formation that they were going into, I think, year 2. And so I applied for that and participated in that and loved it. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience, about an 8-month experience. And I was like, I can't get enough. I want more. I want more. So I became a mentor in that space, and then had gone to like a transforming community, a retreat about the art and practice of spiritual discernment, which was so, like, I would say that is a moment in my relationship with God that was critical, because all the time up until then I had taken ministry gift assessments, And I usually tested for discernment, but I didn't know what that meant. I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know what to do with this.
Mm.
Right? And so going there and actually seeing it lived out and participating in it, and having the person who was leading, the spiritual director who was leading my small, like the visitor group,
Mm-hmm.
like she said, if anyone is looking, like, ask you, was the gift ever affirmed in you?
Mm.
You can say that I'm affirming it this day. And I was like,
Mm.
so beautiful. So from there, it just kind of grew, right? Just started trying to find more opportunities to learn more about it. Became certified as a spiritual director
Right.
just this past May. And it's just been such a beautiful journey. It really
Mm-hmm.
has. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The program you went through for spiritual direction, what was that?
Yeah, so it's Kairos
Mm-hmm.
University. It's listening people to life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I experienced that last year. It was a year-long program because the partnership with Transforming Center and Community.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to be a part of a cohort as well in learning how to be a spiritual director.
Mm.
And that was just, and because I had, around that same time as was connected with the School of Formation, had started to receive spiritual direction for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, this is gold. This
It's
is
gold.
amazing.
Mm. Hey,
It's
what's amazing
amazing.
about it for you?
I think so. When I think about even going back to being a kid and, beginning to read the Bible and read the different things that happen with people in their connection with God throughout time, like over thousands of years, there had began a point where I was just like, it says in the word that God doesn't change. But it seems like these experiences that people are having, these intimate connections with
Mm.
God, I'm not seeing, at least I'm not saying it wasn't existing. Clearly it was. But in my experience, I'm just like, I'm not seeing this. And I'm like, I'm seeing, like, I get that God is not the angry, curmudgeonly, like Zeus like figure that I thought that God was as I was
Mm-hmm.
growing up. But I'm like, so I get who God isn't, right? But
Mm.
like, who is God? Because the scriptures show these interactions with God that are very intimate, very face to face. The way Jesus talks about, about himself, and the talking about the Holy Spirit. I'm just like, there clearly is more available. And so that's what feels amazing and beautiful about it to me, is it is this encounter with this ancient way that I was just like, I mean, I see it and I believe it, but where is it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where is it? How do we access it?
Mm.
How do we access it? And I know it's not just in, because, as I was growing up, it was like, okay, so you pray and you fast and you meditate and you study the Bible. Just do those four things. And I'm like, okay. But then it came along with baggage too. It's like, well, if you're not on your knees praying and if you don't pray for an hour, and I'm like, well, that doesn't feel right either. Like, there was a lot. I don't know if you're a fan of the Matrix movies.
Mm. Hell yeah.
But all right. So that scene, like, the one I'm going to reference is like when Morpheus is talking to Neo, and he's like talking about the splinter in your mind.
Mm.
I'm like, yes, that's just like this thing that keeps on coming back to you. It's like there's something here. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but then coming into this space of spiritual direction, formation, intimacy with God, just really connecting with God,
Mhm.
I'm like, this is the thing. This is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you and your husband, you're pastoring a church, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Mhm.
Actually, this past Sunday, we just, because we that's well, the reason why we moved down to Charlotte in the first
Mhm.
place was to plant a new church, and then in the midst of that, we ended up combining with an already established church, and so we just had our relaunch as the combined group this past Sunday,
Mhm.
and so so we're pastoring a faith community. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you sense the role of spiritual formation is there in the church? How's that coming
Oh,
along?
yeah. I think, honestly, I feel like it's something that I see the faith community probably in the similar space as I was in when I was like, I believe there's something more. I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure what that is. So it feels like we're at this, like, this nexus. I think that's the right way to describe,
Yeah.
like, this point, right? Where it's like, yeah, so people faithful, absolutely faithful, willing servants. So, I mean, when I say servants, I want to be clear, because I try to be really cautious about using the word like God using us or serving God.
Mhm.
I want to be clear that I mean in a relationship, not just,
Mhm.
it's not in a utilitarian way. I don't mean that at all. But being in relationship with God and moving as He moves and
Mhm.
in and with us, and so that is already there. I think folks are in the process of discovering the deeper layer,
Mhm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we're at. It's just like, yeah, okay.
Mm.
Okay, so it's not only about like, okay, I'm a sinner and I want to not sin as much, so I need to do these things. So it's not, and I don't think that was quite it either, even prior to really starting to talk more about formation. It's more so like, what does this look like lived out, right?
Yeah.
So a lot
Yeah.
a lot of what we're really hoping to, I shouldn't say hoping to, a lot of what we are like in communication with the Holy Spirit and being guided by the Holy Spirit looking into is kind of like some of the practices through like practicing the way,
Hmm.
right? Like that walking apprenticeship with Jesus and being followers of the way, like
Yeah.
those types of practices that take us deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that it's a slow journey?
Yes. And I think it should be. I think it should be. I think, in my experience at least, when things are a bit too fast,
Hmm.
sometimes the roots are not quite there. And then
Hmm.
when, not if, but when things get hard,
Yeah.
then you don't really have the weight to hold you.
Okay.
Whereas I think when things develop a little bit more slowly, it's kind of like, I think my husband uses this analogy. I've heard other people use it too. It's like there's like, things that are microwaves. It's like, does it get heated up? It
Mm.
does. But the flavor and the consistency is not really quite what you want, right? Whereas if you cook something like on the stove or in a crock pot, it takes a lot longer, but the flavor gets in there and
Hmm.
it's good, right? So I think
So
that's
yeah,
like slow is good. I think slow is
slow,
good.
low and slow. Is that what they talk about
Yes.
with
Yes.
smokers? Yeah. You're an educator as well.
Mhm.
You have a lot
Yes.
of influence and impact in the educational space. Uh,
Yes.
I'm curious about that. How as an educator and as a
Mhm.
consultant, you've been
Mhm.
shaped, or how it may has shaped both ways. How has
Yeah.
spiritual formation impacted your understanding of education and vice versa? Because I think this is really important to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. So I will say I started my journey as an educator in probably around like 1999. I didn't even know that that's what I was going to do. I think like when I was graduating from college, I was like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to work for a magazine, and then I was like, no, not that. And then I initially went to graduate school for in a graduate creative writing program, and I was like, nope, this is not quite it either. Although I do love to write, clearly,
Hmm.
right? So there's
Hmm.
that. But then there was, I mean, I just really believe it was God leading, and I see, like, I will talk about like how that worked out. Leading because when I was in fourth and fifth grade, I had the same two teachers for those 2 years, and it was amazing. Like I said, I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to a public school, and in those grades, I just remember just really loving school. Like, and I was having experiences in school that I was like, yeah, this is fantastic, right? We were learning Latin and we were reading Shakespeare, like not little kid Shakespeare, but like actual Shakespeare. And I didn't realize at the time that not every kid my age was having that experience, and not even every kid in the building, right? So that's going to
Mm.
come into play in a second. But I was like, yeah. So I think when I thought back to like what I want to do, I'm like, oh, I want to be like the teachers I had were Miss Kamler and Miss Miller, and I'm like, I want to be for kids who they were for me, like really
Mm.
making
Mm.
learning exciting and engaging and rigorous and all of these things. And
Mm.
so I ended up going to get my graduate degree in elementary education. And when I first started teaching, one of the things that what brought to my attention, because the body I live in this brown body, right? So my I'm largely descended from enslaved Africans, and so I was like, yeah. When I think about culturally responsive teaching and learning, I was like, yeah, I got that in the bag. I'm a black woman. I grew up in New York City. That's extra special, right? Because
Mm.
New Yorkers.
Mm.
My husband, who is from New Jersey, will tell you how he feels about New York people from New York City, right? So it's like me and him are like Romeo and Juliet. How do we end up being together?
That's, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yep. But then what ended up happening was as I started to practice as a classroom teacher, I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't understand. And I understand some things. I didn't learn a lot about Black history in school. I learned it mostly from my parents, who
Hmm.
are largely self-taught about Black history, or I would say like Black people's contributions to U.S. history, which I think is a more accurate frame. But because they were self-taught, there's a lot that they didn't know either, because you had to really go looking for information. It wasn't as readily available as I think it should
Mm.
have been and should be currently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as I started like being a teacher, I'm just like, yeah, yeah, there's a lot that I'm not doing quite right because I'm assuming that kids who have lived experiences like mine, even if there are challenges, and I had a lot of challenges in like when I was growing up in my family and in community, I was like, all you got to do is love school, right? If you love school, you'll be fine.
Mm.
And I was like, no, the reason why I love school was because I was being treated differently than the other kids in the building. I
Mm.
was tracked high and given opportunities that other kids who were just as capable as I was were not having. And so I was like, so then I think that started to introduce me to like systemic thinking of
Mm-hmm.
like access, opportunities, inequalities, injustices, things like
Yeah.
that. And so started to learn a lot about culturally responsive teaching and learning. And so, but then that felt incomplete because I'm just like, yeah, I think it's good to think about how minoritized and marginalized people have been treated in systems in the United States. But I'm like, but there's a missing element, right? Because we also think God has this is where God really started to really lean in with me. I mean, he was leaning in the whole time, but
Mm-hmm.
leaning in a particular way
Mm-hmm.
is like, okay, I see what you're learning about black and brown kids. What about kids who've been racialized as white? And I'm just like, I know, right? Like, because it's just like, because people would say things to me that I was like, yeah, I have a question about that. Like, what are white kids supposed to do on multicultural day? And I'm like, good question. Right, good question. My even my kids weren't sure what to do on multicultural day because they were like, we don't know where our ancestors are from really. So my kids were doing like, I told them that at that point I had not had my ancestry DNA results, so I didn't know some of the details.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids were doing presentations on Ireland because they were like, we think we have Irish ancestors. I'm like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so really bringing together like culturally responsive teaching and learning
Mm-hmm.
and like anti-racism, that's kind of where it developed, but then it went deeper than that because I had some folks who were like mentors who were like, when we think about anti-racism, not to say that's a bad thing because we do want to be against things that are harmful, but it can't just be about what we're against. It's like, what are we
Mm.
for? What do
Yep.
we want instead?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, very good question. So that's why my book has that anti-racist pro-human, right? That
Mm-hmm.
after the colon. And so looking at where formation leans in, it's just like, in order to truly heal from deep wounds of any kind, any type of brokenness, it really takes the Holy Spirit
Mm-hmm.
and access to, like really connecting with the Holy Spirit to heal what's broken inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I started really thinking about this. Like I was thinking about like the abolitionist movement, how there was cross-racial and cross-ethnic solidarity and cooperation in the civil rights movement. Same thing, right? There were freedom riders who were of different racial groups who were all together working
Mm-hmm.
together in solidarity. And so I was like, yeah, so this is an all of us thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so really started thinking about formation, about like how have we been malformed or deformed, and racialization really is a big part of that because it's all made up, right? Like
Yeah.
race isn't even a real thing, but the impact of that created thing is awful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just thinking about how God can come in and help us at the root of where we are broken, that's where it starts to come together for me. So I'm just like, it can't be about blaming each other and pointing fingers and segregation and separation. It has to be a coming together,
Mm-hmm.
especially for those of us who are followers of the Jesus way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you have recently had a article published on missioalliance.org. Uh, if anybody wants to look it up, I'm going to make sure I have a link in our podcast notes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually published middle of August. The
Yeah.
title of it's an invitation to racial healing as spiritual formation. So I think you're
Yes.
just kind of just dipping your toe a bit in the water there as you're talking to us about how that all that began to form in you.
Yeah.
What's the name of the book though that you are
Hmm.
writing and is going to be published by IVP here pretty soon?
Yeah, so it's called, the working title is Sowing the Seeds of Shalom,
Okay.
Racial Healing as Spiritual Formation.
There we go. All right. So
There
you
we go.
introduced this word shalom into the conversation
Yes.
of racial
Yes.
healing and
Hmm.
spiritual formation together. There's so much to unpack here. I'd love to start with the word shalom as your
Yes.
central image for this work.
Yeah.
Why did you choose that word?
I chose it. So one of the blessings of being in community across like racial ethnic differences
Hmm.
is being able to learn from one another. So
Hmm.
I don't remember how many years ago this was. I know like I usually now I kind of quantify time in like pre-COVID. So I'm like, I know it was prior to COVID. So I'm thinking maybe like 2018 is when I went to my
Okay.
first Seder with friends
Okay.
of ours who are Jewish. And I had like have always been drawn to the word peace, but I had, I was thinking like absence of war or like tranquility, right? Like that's how I
Yeah.
thought about it.
Yeah.
But really being in those spaces of taking a deeper dive into what does the word shalom mean, and just really leaning into the fact it means like nothing missing and
Mm.
nothing broken. And I was like, ooh, okay, okay. And so that immediately draws me to God because I'm like, there's nothing missing in God. And in God, there's no brokenness in God. And the brokenness that is in us can be healed in God. And
Mhm.
so I was like, yeah, so that's, yes, that deep level. It's not the same as like, because I think sometimes people can kind of, especially across differences, can be like, yeah, we want to cooperate with each other, or we want to be kind to each other, or we want to be tolerant of each other. And I'm just like, yeah, those are things are not, that's not quite it, right?
Yeah.
Because those things can shift really easily, right?
Mhm.
But that sense of shalom, of like wholeness, that's something more powerful. Yeah.
Mhm. So
Hmm.
let's circle back around with that idea of shalom as wholeness,
Yes.
back around to racial healing and
Yes.
spiritual formation.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the role of what when we talk about spiritual formation,
Yep. Yep.
what are we talking about?
Yeah, for me, it's because I'm like, I know I'm like, and I'm not going to be able to cite the source, so I apologize ahead of
Mhm.
time. But I remember reading like we are formed by lots of things, right? There's lots of things that form us. It's really about paying attention to what or who is forming us. So when I think about spiritual formation, it's to me is being in and available to God and with God and being shaped into the image of who Jesus
Mhm.
is and who God, as our loving, adoring creator,
Mhm.
designed us to be.
Mhm.
And so I feel like at the foundation, that's what it is, right? It's
Mhm.
being formed into who our God had in mind, right? Like when he had
Right.
plans for our lives, right? When he had plans for all of our lives, right? That he has ideas that are perfect and
Mhm.
beautiful. And
Mhm.
then tapping into like, God, like tell me, who is it that you made me to be, and
Mhm.
learning from God, who is pure love and pure light,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
who we are. Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
there's this invitation of healing, like we were talking
Yes.
about, and moving
Yes.
toward this flourishing life that God really intended for us to be and to become, and
Yes.
to what end? What would you
Absolutely.
say?
That
And
that
that's a
peace.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think about God in community as Father, Son, and Spirit, and that we're invited into that space of community and communion with God and with one another. And so that's the piece too. It's like if there's any fracture in us, that is not what God's
Mm-hmm.
intention was,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's the piece. And like I know there's lots of different fractures. Like there can be many, and there can and are and will be many books written about lots of different ways that we have fractures in our human relationships. I'm
Mm-hmm.
particularly concerned about the racial fracture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add this in because it's not directly about spiritual formation, but I think it will help to paint a picture. When I usually like I've had the opportunity to sit with lots of different audiences, and I usually will put up a picture of this like group of kids. It's a picture that was taken in 1973. It's in Michigan. There's like, kids who have been racialized as black and white. They're in this alley together and they're just smiling and they have their arms around each other, and you can just tell they're comfortable with each other. They're friends. You can just see it. You can see it emanating from the picture. And so I was just like, this is it, right? This is what, when we're not interrupted, this is who we are. We are embracing one another. We are with one another. It doesn't mean that we don't have tension or difficulty. We do, but we're able to move through it. And that's coming back to that wholeness, right? It's like if there's a rupture, like we in God repair by participating in that, in that love flow that God makes available to us. And so that piece too is just like, yeah, God did not intend for us to be segregated and separated and angry with each other. Like that's not God's intention. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we get as close? Because I'm like, I know in this world we're going to have right
Mm-hmm.
difficulty, but
Yeah.
how do we as believers and followers of the way, we're supposed to be the aroma of the kingdom of
Uh-huh.
God, right? We're supposed to be like city on the hill, right? Salt, all these things. And so especially looking at how things are currently, I'm like, what are we doing? Right? What are we doing?
Right. Yeah. The
Hmm.
spiritual formation journey can be become very internalized and personal. And it is
Yes.
that there is an element
Yes.
of us being formed into the image of Christ.
Yeah.
Sometimes the knock against this movement might be that it is too self-driven,
Yes.
um, focused at the
Yes.
expense of the larger community. I think that's what I like
Yes.
about your book, and where
Mm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
heading is that there
Yes.
is our spiritual formation is not only for our good, but for the good of the world, for the
Ab-
shalom of the world, the
yes.
wholeness of the world. And
Yes.
so you, in your article, you say, in a world fractured by racialization, injustice, and wounded histories, God
Mm.
invites us, the followers of the
Mm-hmm.
way of Jesus, to a
Mm-hmm.
formational healing journey that is both personal and
Yes.
communal,
Yes.
existing as both a social imperative
Mm-hmm.
and a holy calling.
Yes.
Can you unpack a bit of how you've even seen glimpses of shalom breaking
Ooh.
through in the community, into these communal spaces, and that social
Yes.
imperative?
Absolutely. So I'll talk a bit about, like, from the work that I've been able to do with different folks, and this is prior to the writing of, like, as I'm writing this book now. It started even with Open Windows, Open Minds, like my first book, because I would go into spaces, and even thankfully I had the gift of being able to do a TED Ed talk and talking about, like, how do we have these difficult conversations about race, and how do we lean into it. And so, what's been really beautiful to see, and I know that God had me do this work in a very specific way.
Mm,
When I would get into spaces, I would begin by talking about my own stuff, right? I'm just like, I am not someone who is coming like I'm some expert or I've arrived. I'm speaking from the top of the mountain down to people. Like, that's not it at all. We all have work to do. And so, what the way that I saw this show up in community is talking about my own stuff. I'm just like, I'm ableist, right? Like, there's all kinds of stuff that comes to mind for me, like, that I overlook, not because I'm trying to be malicious, but because I'm not thinking about the experiences of people who are unlike me,
mm,
right? And I think that's a typical human condition. But for those of us who are followers of the way, it's just like, yeah, we can't just rest there, because we have a different calling, right? We
mm,
have a deeper calling. And so
yeah.
one of the things that was really beautiful is that I would just kind of put my stuff out there and be like, yeah, we all have growth to do, and we all got to start from ourselves and growing, healing in ourselves so we can be someone healthier in the world. And just seeing, like, folks starting to open up and being like being willing to say, like, thank you for saying where you struggle. I'm struggling
Mm,
too. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. We could talk about that, right? So it's like this invitational piece. And I really do believe, like, I mean, you and I know, and, like, I'm sure our listeners really, when we think about things like confession and lament and grieving and those spiritual practices, like, how they get us into a place, like, not to be in a place of, like, shame or guilt, but a place of recovery, right?
mm,
Of
mm,
being able to heal, right? And so that's the piece, like that, the piece that I like about being in community, is having these conversations, is being like, yeah, we should all be sad about this. And we all, because we all are human beings, a part of the same human family,
mhm,
and seeing people willing to open up and to say, me too, I've said this, I've done this, I've been in spaces and I didn't speak up, like, these are beliefs that I've had that I don't feel good about, is
mhm.
being able to share that grief and that lament, and then imagine a way forward, right?
Okay.
Together we
Yeah.
imagine a way forward. And so that, it's been beautiful.
Mm,
And I feel so honored to be in those spaces where that is happening, and where the trust is there. Like, sometimes this is happening at a conference where
yeah.
we may not even see each other again, right? And so just being able to see lots of that, and then developing, and for me, I'm just like, yeah, this connects completely to, like, what happens when I'm experiencing, like, Lectio Divina, when I'm going deeper into a scripture and seeing what Holy Spirit is saying to me in these words, right? And how do we connect this with how we're living out who Jesus is in society, right?
Mhm, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
this is really great. So
Mm-hmm.
you're saying that through vulnerability, yours,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
authenticity, yours, in these
Mm-hmm.
spaces where you're invited to come in and speak,
Yes.
and your own transformational journey that you
Mm,
happen to be on,
yes.
you're noticing spirit creating a
Yes.
space that looks a lot like grace,
Yes.
where people are
Yes.
able to raise their hands and say,
Me
you know, me
too.
too,
Yeah.
and actually have a meaningful dialogue that leans into Christian imagination
Yes.
for
Yes.
okay, yeah,
Yes. And it's so refreshing to be a part of it because, it's not like when I go in, I'm not like, yay, I get to talk about these things that I've done that I'm like, I don't feel good about it. I'm not proud of it. But I'm like, but it's important to say it. So I'll give like for example, I do not feel good about the fact that when I go to a supermarket, store, whatever, when I see the accessible parking spaces, I want to park there because in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to be in there that long. The space is right there. I'm just going to be in and out. And so Spirit's saying to me, it's just like Africa, right? Is that space for you? And I'm like, no, right? It's like, are you able to go and park in other spaces? Yes. And so, like, I'll share things like that. And so I'm just like, and then, like, not just that example, but I'll use other examples too. It's like, am I like, oh, I feel like I hate people who need the space? It's not about hating, it's about me prioritizing myself and my wants over other people. And
mm-hmm,
that's not who God intends for us to be. So
yeah,
sharing some of those things, it's
mm-hmm,
just like, yeah, me too. I do that too. I'm
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
it's not, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, back to this idea of formation, Christian
Mm-hmm.
spiritual formation, how we are being formed more and more into the image of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is we're becoming people of love, right?
Yes. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And love as God is love. And I think just because you mentioned that, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
important, I think, to call out. I just was talking to my dad about this the other day. We use the word love so without regard for what it really means.
Mm-hmm.
You could be like, oh, I love pizza, or I'm like, I love mint chocolate chip ice cream, right? Like, and I'm trying to stop using the word that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing too, like when we use the word awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, love is it's cruciform, right? For us,
There you
right
go.
there, it's cruciform. It's not like, oh, what feels good to me. It's like what is good, what is for the good of being aligned with God and with who He
Yeah.
intends for us to be in community.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to step out on my own little limb here for a minute.
Please, please, please.
So this isn't so much about racial healing
Yeah.
as it is in the LGBTQ space.
Yes.
And one of
Yeah.
my areas where I would say I would want to confess,
Mm-hmm.
in a space of vulnerability would
Yes.
be I have two sons who are gay in my
Mm-hmm.
family, my
Mm-hmm.
children too.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love them dearly. I
Yes.
noticed as my older one was growing up, and I was just kind of identifying, I'm a pastor. If anybody needs to
Mm-hmm.
know, I
Yeah.
have a background as a pastor in a church. That's what I've done
Yes.
for years and years and years. But as
Yeah.
my children were growing up, I was just watching my son and just wondering and beginning to
Mm-hmm.
open myself up to God as to what's happening and
Yes.
how do you want to transform me in
Yes.
this process. But
Yes.
I made the comments about to my wife, probably mostly, of like,
Mm-hmm.
if my son ever comes out as gay,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm going to have to wrestle with some things,
Mm-hmm.
really wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt good and
Yeah.
noble for me to say that. But it wasn't
Yeah.
until Africa, after this
Mm-hmm.
happened, actually, that I
Mm-hmm.
began to feel a bit of my own sense of guilt around not noticing that I was sitting in a position of power,
Yes. Yes.
that I could name something and have the
Mm-hmm.
power to say, I don't have to deal with that yet. And so
Yes.
I won't.
Yes. Yes. That part.
That
Mm-hmm.
part right there.
That part. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And so as I came to recognize just in my own spirit, I wish that I would have like had a desire and a spirit and a courage and an awareness of my own power that
Yes.
would have helped me say earlier, it's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not about waiting until it personally affects me. What can
Right.
I be doing now? What I just so
Right.
I say that to say, uh, the kind of space that you're creating where you can have these kinds of dialogues is so helpful
Yes.
across the board,
Yes.
if we're willing to engage the conversation. And I realize some of these conversations, either around LGBTQ or even around
Hmm.
racial stuff, they're very politicized, and so
Yeah.
people are avoiding the conversation
Yeah. Yeah.
entirely.
Yes.
But the kind of space you're creating, and
Yes.
who you are, and uniquely you, I
Yeah.
think your voice, uniquely you, your spirit,
Yeah.
your love of God, your desire
Yeah.
to create shalom through all of
Hmm.
this, I think God is I think that's what makes you unique, and this conversation very unique in
Thank
the space that
you.
you're trying to carry it forward. And so thank you.
Oh, I really is thank you so much for saying that. I really do appreciate that.
So your book sounds to me
Hmm.
like you're going to dive into various practices
Yes.
that will help us become the kind of people who are cooperating with the spirit in us and at
Yes.
work in the world to bring this shalom into
Yeah.
spaces that especially racial healing. Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
just give us a bit of your heart for the kind of practices you're excited about sharing with us in this space.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for that question. So, in the way that Spirit is leading me to structure the book is with specific practices based on the seasons of the year.
Okay.
And so it
Okay.
will begin with autumn, which I like that because it's my favorite season. Like right now, I'm so
Mhm.
happy. Like it's a little cooler
You're the
outside.
happy.
I
You're
love.
happy.
I am. I am. I am.
Yeah.
I know everybody doesn't feel that way. Some people like mourning the end of summer, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, it's time for pumpkins.
Yeah.
All that stuff, right? So, but that piece of it too, like, because it's when I think about the autumn or like the fall, it's like, yeah, there's like these beautiful things that we've been enjoying that are beginning to end, right?
Mm.
Like at first, like the color is changing and it's beautiful, but it gets to a point where it's like, ooh, those leaves are looking kind of rough.
Mm.
They're falling and they're disintegrating, and then the trees don't have the leaves anymore. And so, like, what I've been in planning out the book is like, okay, so in autumn, what that will align with is like a Lectio Divina practice of like how do we participate in the word getting deeper into us and
Mhm.
getting to a point where it can help us to let go of ideas that are not what God has in mind for
Okay.
us, right?
Okay.
And so, for example, with Lectio Divina, I mean, you could do it with lots of different passages, but what came to mind for me as I was thinking about it was like, ooh, like what if you do a Lectio Divina experience about like, First Corinthians 13, it talks about what love is.
Mhm.
Oh, it talks and like really taking a dive into, and it doesn't have to be like a whole passage, it could just be one verse. But even thinking about like the fruit of the spirit, of thinking about the beatitudes, those things that are really taking us into what it means to be formed, especially when we think about fruit of the spirit, that it aligns really well. And thinking about that, it's like, so who did God make us to be, right? And so what needs to fall away for us to be that person, that part of the human family? And then after the fall comes winter, and so there'll be some time to engage in the examine, where we can spend some time
Mhm.
being, expressing gratitude to God for, how God is showing up and how we see God. But then also looking at that part where it's like, ooh, I'm seeing my false self showing up in these ways, and this my shadow self is showing up in these ways. And that equates to me with winter, because there's still life blooming, but we can't see it quite yet.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
under the surface. It's easy for me as I'm like, I'll talk about privilege. I'm like, I have Northeast privilege. So I'm just like, when I think about winter, I'm just like, snow. I know winter for everybody doesn't include snow. But for me, a lot of times we think about winter and snow and what's happening under the
Right.
surface of the
Right.
ground, right?
Right.
There's seeds are under there. There's germination happening. There's root systems developing. And then when we move into the next season of the year, moving from winter into spring, it's looking more like leaning more into contemplative prayer or
Mm.
centering prayer and just being present with God and leaning into that silence that really allows us to start to grow new
Mhm.
things, right? To germinate this new life that is evident on the outside. And then moving from spring into summer, it's like when you start to see the fruit that has been growing all this time, that will for me like align with imaginative prayer. And I will
Mhm.
say like imaginative prayer is one of the most profound spirit experiences I've ever had
Mm.
in a retreat. I never even knew anything like that was possible, but where you just really place yourself with God and just present with you, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where you start to see that fruits. Like, what is it that you've been growing in me, and how does it now bear out that the world will get to enjoy it? It's not like
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about, it's not just what's internal, and that's good,
Mm.
it's important, but it's not the only thing. It's just one
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what it's
Oh,
looking like.
wow. You came alive when you shared that imaginative
Oh yeah,
prayer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah, and I
yes,
know that
yes,
in the world of Christian um, faith,
yeah,
sometimes imagination looks we kind of look at it a little cross-eyed, like,
yeah, yep,
what, let's just stick with what the word says, right?
yes.
Yet
Mm-hmm.
Jesus seemed to do a lot of storytelling and would
He
say the
sure did.
kingdom is like, and
Like,
so he
yes.
kept on trying to invite people's imagination into, it could be
Yes.
this, it's like that, it's like this, it's like,
Yes.
so uh, I'm with you. I think imaginative
Yes.
prayer and imaginative vision with God is
Mhm.
a really important part of my journey as well.
Yes.
How in particular would you say this practice of imaginative prayer would help to rehumanize what
Mm.
racism has is deformed in us?
Yeah, so I'm gonna let you into something that, because I was thinking about, I mean, I'm thinking about the book a lot. And
Yeah.
so an idea that Spirit gave to me, and we'll see if it bears out or not. But just when it comes to like imaginative prayer in particular, I was like, yeah, there's all these books that come to mind that people can read and learn more about practices and about content around
Right.
race and all those things. But I'm just like, yeah, but I don't want to ask somebody to go read like a whole other book, right? To In order to enjoy this practice.
Mhm.
And so I was like, but what if, because there's so many, like, and this comes from my experience as an educator, particularly as an elementary educator,
Mhm.
I am so in love with children's books. And
Mm.
so some of it is just like in marrying together like an imaginative prayer practice with a children's book.
Okay.
And after having read that, it's just like, okay, so imagine yourself with Jesus talking about this, or
Mhm.
imagine yourself back in this scenario and God is with you and is present with you. Like, what do you smell?
Okay.
What do you
All right.
taste? What are you hearing? How do you feel? What is the temperature? Right? Like, what are you noticing? And just allowing us, because I feel like in that way it helps it to our connection with God and with one another to be more embodied,
Mm.
because I think we don't really do a lot of embodiment when it comes
Yeah.
to connecting with one another
Yeah.
as much as I
Mm.
think we would benefit from. But just really like imagining ourselves, like, the words that God has said, right? And like you said, Jesus has left us so many examples and stories that give a great window into how he processes things and design things. And just imagining ourselves, it's like, what do you imagine God would be saying? What do you imagine? How might you respond? Right? Like, how do you think that would feel to hear God saying that to you?
Mhm.
And especially when it comes like not only to ourselves, but when it comes to our relationships with other people. Right. And I think some good healing can happen there because we're now envisioning ourselves in that space. It's going beyond the cerebral. It's going
Mm.
beyond like, just reading a book and thinking about something. It's
Mhm.
imagining it being real because it is real for us.
Yeah.
Because this God is real and God in us is real.
And I think so. Here's how imaginative prayer becomes a practice, right? It's like we're
Yes.
practicing the space of our minds and our thoughts that are always consuming us. They always are.
Yes.
We're always
Yes.
off somewhere in our mind, right? Where are
Yes.
we? Usually, we're
Yes.
imagining things turning out worse than they are. We're imagining
Yes.
people kind of worse than they are. We're
Yes.
imagining we're imagining worst case scenarios, and if you're a
Yes.
6 on the enneagram, maybe even more so,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
there is a reforming, there's a restoring
Yeah.
of a prophetic imagination, a good
Yes.
I have a dream kind of an imagination.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely.
We talked a little bit about how a lot of these conversations can get really politicized.
Yeah.
How do you respond to Christians who are resisting this idea that racial healing might even be part of following
Mm.
Jesus? Africa?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like Jesus makes it a lot easier to have these conversations because there are very distinct things that Jesus has said that we can refer to,
Okay.
right? Like when Jesus talks about, like the words of Isaiah being fulfilled in our hearing, right? I remember putting myself there even though I wasn't in the space, right? Like those things about like what Jesus came to do, to set the captive free and to, in the healing for the oppressed and things like that. So I'm just like, okay, so this is what Jesus has said. There are so many verses that are in scripture and so many examples that even beyond the actual written text that we can look at to see the beauty of the healing that can take place between people in different people groups.
Right.
And so like I mean we more so have the example that's taken place outside of the US. So we can make reference to like what has happened in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have that. We have what happened in Germany after the Holocaust, after World War II. We haven't quite gotten that space in the US yet, but I'm really a hopeful person.
Mm.
And I really do believe that it's possible, especially if those who call upon the name of Jesus are following Jesus. And so if folks push back, it's just like, you can't really stand up against the words of Jesus, right? Like how Jesus was. And just kind of thinking about
Mm.
like when we're looking at Jesus's life on earth and who he spent time with and who he criticized most actively. Looking at those spaces and then also too like looking at the fruit, right? Looking at the fruit of the spirit, reading First Corinthians 13, it really breaks down and like in John especially talking about what love looks like,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like we have all of those reference points to go to and to really grapple there, right? It's just like, if this is who you say you follow, and this is who he is and who he's created us to be, we need to, like, what are we noticing here? And
Mm-hmm.
what are we wondering about the disconnect between who God made us to be and who we are largely perceived as Christians to be?
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What are we wondering about the
Mm-hmm.
disconnect?
Mm-hmm.
That presumes we are wondering, that we're taking any, that we're pausing at all to wonder.
Yes.
Mm.
But then that's it too, because if the response is I'm not wondering, then that gives another space for questioning. Why?
Yeah.
Why aren't you wondering, right? Like especially
Yeah.
like we look at examples like the Good Samaritan, like there's so many examples of who God made us to be, like we talked about earlier, that aroma of the kingdom of God where things are life-giving. And like we hear like, there's no fear in love, perfect love casts out fear. So if we're involved in things that are harmful or fear-mongering or oppressive or unjust, those things are not aligned with who God is. And so if that's what you're going to align yourself with, that's your choice, but just know that it is not the Jesus way. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to be that straightforward about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap up our conversation, Africa, and I want to just give you a
Yeah.
chance to share with everybody how they might be able to stay in touch with you, what they can
Oh, wow.
anticipate
Yeah.
in your book coming out, and kind of time frames, and just
Yeah.
how can people continue this conversation?
Oh, absolutely. So I am on Facebook as Afrika Afeni Mills. You can follow me there, request to follow me on LinkedIn. So same name there. On Instagram, I'm on there as well as Joy Spirit. It's all one word.
Okay.
And but thinking about the work that I'm doing and how to follow that still, I recently started a Substack called Shalom Seeds
Okay.
to align, right? So Shalom Seeds, you can follow my Substack. And then just kind of looking at the timeline for the book, like I am working on the initial draft of the book right now. I am set to hand it over to the publisher in like mid-January.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my hope. This is what I hope. I don't know if it's going to work out this way. My hope is that it is available in the next summer
Mm-hmm.
so that because it starts with the fall that people are ready.
That's
They're
right.
ready to go, jump right into the season and
Yep.
into the work. And my big dream is that I really like I'm seeing what God will say about this, but I really would love to run a racial healing like a retreat center.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely keep in touch with me because I see God, there's some things I have stirring that may lead to being able to start some of that. And so
Okay.
if you connect with me, you'll definitely find ways to stay in touch with me to
Yeah.
hear a bit more about that. Yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Hey, as we close, what's one simple step our listeners could take just to
Mm.
begin now integrating spiritual formation and racial healing into their lives?
Yeah, I would say when you're thinking about like bringing the two in, is giving yourself like just some time and space to sit and think about back to when you were a little kid,
Mm,
when you were a little child, like when you were first beginning to make friends that you remember, when you were beginning to connect with people, when you were beginning to ask questions, and marrying that part of yourself, because it's very similar to the beginning of our spiritual formation journey, is almost like a new birth, right? And a new formation. It's like when we were little kids, I don't know, like if you vibe with this too, but I'm like, I just wanted to play. I wasn't thinking about like whose skin color was what. And maybe I didn't want to play with a kid who was like, who would cheat or anything like that. Right. I'm like, I wanted to play with kids who were fair, but I'm like, I just wanted to play. And I'm like, just getting back to that place of like, who were we in the beginning before we started to get interrupted? And then marrying that with our spiritual formation practices, like, God, who did you make me to be before
mm.
fracture started to set in?
Okay, good. That's
Yeah.
really good. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for
So
bringing
welcome.
yourself to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thanks for being with us today, Africa.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a gift to spend this time with Afrika Afeni Mills. Africa's words invite us not just to think differently, but to live differently, yeah? To sow seeds of shalom in our everyday relationships and in our communities. So if today's conversation stirred something in you, I encourage you to sit with it, share it, let it shape the way you move through the week ahead. As always, I'm grateful you're here with us on the Being Formed podcast. So be sure to join us next time as we continue exploring the practices, the stories, and the wisdom that help us live more deeply formed lives with God. If you're looking for some practical ways to actually engage in the journey of spiritual formation in a context of community, I'd encourage you to visit our website, lifepointresources.org. If you click on the Engage tab, you'll see there's an events page, and we have lots of events listed there that you can sign up for in partnership with some of our friends and other ministries like Signpost Inn and our good buddy Brandon Booth. And he's offering incredible discounts for LifePoint listeners, people who listen to this podcast. So check out our website, see what we have coming up, and see how you might want to get plugged in. Okay? All right, until next time, grace and peace.